Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. I'm Dabney Lawless. I'm an evolutionary astrologer and I studied with Stephen Forrest for over 20 years. I am very excited today to have with me Sherene Vismaya, if I said that correctly, hopefully. She's a Jungian analyst and an astrologer, and she has a lot of experience, and I just signed up for her newsletter. And it is very interesting and intellectual and powerful. It just, really brought home like that she does a different kind of astrology than so many people out there, which I thought was really exciting. And she came highly recommended from a friend of mine. So welcome, Sherene. How are you today?
Surviving the whirlwind of all this Uranian energy, but just flying with it, enjoying it.
Lovely. So today, Sherene and I are going to be talking about the Neptune-Saturn dance that's happening in the sky right now. I know we've talked a lot about that, but I think it's really important. And so I was excited that she was going to offer yet another perspective that kind of talks about where we're headed, how we can navigate these kind of cloudy times right now. Sherene also has a retreat coming up in India. So, Sherene, do you want to tell us a little bit about this retreat in India that you've got coming up?
Yes, thank you. I would love to. So it's called Secret of the Golden Flower, which the title itself is inspired by Jung's commentary for the I Ching. And it's a really it's kind of a dream come true retreat that I've been working on for many, many years. It's been like, speaking of Neptune at 29 Pisces, it's been a vision that I've been hoping to crystallize, but just waiting for all the pieces to fall into place. And that's been, I think, the beauty of the Saturn Neptune confluence, that finally the vision is coming to life. And so it's November 1st through the 9th, starting on this very auspicious day of Diwali, which is it's a very powerful day where it's a period we move into of bringing the light into the darkness, basically. And so it's a perfect time to go inward. It's in Western astrology, so like the Scorpio time, right after the Day of the Dead. And it's kind of my dream period, which is also a high season in India and perfect weather in India. So it was really hard to do, but by all the miracles, I found an amazing travel agent to team up with, who was like this rock star VIP, very, she only does very small and like, really like high-end retreats. So that was also something I wanted, to work with a woman and to work like not in a corporate kind of like profit base, but something really like something curated. So we were able to combine our visions and put together like a dream retreat. Anyway, so it's November 1st or 9th, and it culminates on my birthday, because the 9 days just happened to end on November 9th. So it's going to end with a big birthday bash on the Lake Picola in Udaipur, which is very exciting.
So wonderful. So I'm going to put the full details along with a link below in my description. So if you are called to get in touch with a little bit more scorpionic, spiritual, astrological, psychological mystery, it sounds like Sherene might be your person. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on. Do you want to set the stage with the Saturn and Neptune and what's happening in the sky, and kind of get a little bit of what's on your mind?
Well, it's interesting. Speaking of this guy, since I'm in New Mexico, I've been so blown away by how beautiful the lavender sunsets are here, and I was like, this is so Neptune, so beautiful. And I'm starting with that because I think, we can talk about the higher octave of Neptune or the shadow of Neptune, and both are, I think, very important right now. And the higher octave, of course, we'll start with that, is just the sheer beauty. It's a higher octave of Venus. So it's, I think, our opportunity right now to experience a certain level of what might seem like sublime beauty in our life is really strong, because Neptune being retrograde is very strong. And at that anaretic degree, 29 degrees, it's really powerful. And it's at the end of a cycle that we started in 2012, right? So I think this is a time where we're all feeling extra nostalgic. You may even be going back to a feeling you've had since 2012, where Neptune first entered Pisces and you had that sense of, there's something mystical. There's something we've had I've watched it unfold, like a resurgence with crystals and astrology, just completely, all the mystical art forms and working with the unconscious, even Jungian psychology becoming more mainstream. All of these things, of course, social media, Instagram, I think is a big Neptune and Pisces, like illusion and images and just the power of imagery, I think, is Neptune and Pisces. So gosh, we could talk so many things. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent already, so you can rein me in a little.
No, no, it's interesting. I mean, I agree with you. I think when I think of Pisces and Neptune, I mean, there's, like you said, there's the high side and there's the low side. And the high side is really, really fantastic. Like it is the most beautiful beauty. It is the most, profound love for humanity. It is the most stunning, piece of classical music. And it is the birds and the trees. I mean, it is like the height of the height. And then the low of the low, if you really get into the like nightmare that Neptune and Pisces can be. So there's kind of like an extreme that we end up just sort of almost like seeing a blurry haze because of that extreme. Sometimes like it's almost like a repressed memory where you can't fully grasp it, is a little bit of how I think of it. It's like if you really are immersed in it, it's just happening. So
That's a good point. Yeah, in the unconscious side of Neptune, it's kind of like this beautiful quote of one of Jung's disciples, Barbara Hanna. She said, the unconscious is beautiful, but also terrible. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying this Neptune and Pisces is like, it's that Beyonce lyric, sweet dream or beautiful nightmare. And because Neptune is so much about the illusion. So and I always feel when Neptune goes retrograde, it's a little bit of the test of like, did you learn to see through certain illusions that have, made you spellbound in the past and maybe landed you in a deep ditch? That's my thought guru would say. So I think we're being tested right now. There's I think I've watched a lot of my clients going through something very cyclical, as we always do when we are in a retrograde cycle. But again, going back to 2012 and just looking at this full spectrum of all the lessons learned and like where you were playing things out that might have been even in the realm of self-deception and in the realm of blind spots and projection, and having to reclaim all of that and really look at, okay, here's the Saturn piece of it. So how do you get real with yourself? Once you see through the illusion, once the disillusionment sets in of something you were trying to make into something else, I mean, of course, the beauty of this creation is that it's based in Maya, which is the ultimate Neptune. Like without it, everything, I always say it's like, sometimes Neptune retrograde feels like when you're turning the lights on in the bar at the end of the night. I always say it's like you really see how everything looks, you're like, oh, for the illusion, you see the sticky floor and like everything, the makeup all smudged, So it's a little bit like that, I think. And we're obviously like the fact that this is happening, we're at not just the end of a cycle of Neptune, but the end of the zodiac. So we're collectively at the end of something very profound. And we've been in this unfoldings. If you go back to first we had the Saturn Pluto conjunction, and then we had the Saturn Jupiter conjunction, and now we're going to get the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So you notice every time Saturn conjuncts an outer planet, well, Jupiter's not an outer planet, but these big planets, that it's significant, especially the Saturn Pluto. That was very significant.
That was the pandemic.
Right.
For those that are not versed in that. Yeah.
That was the pandemic. And I think that this one is also going to be huge. So because of the nature of Neptune, we could make some educated guesses of themes that could show up. I mean, of course, there's a lot of talk about another pandemic. I hate to say that, but Neptune is very much about contagion, but I don't think it would have the same, it won't have that lockdown theme of Saturn Pluto control and, plague-like energies. But there probably will be something around, well, it doesn't be a pandemic, but there could be something, there's some kind of contagious, again, it could be mass hysteria. It could be Messiah kind of complexes, which we're already seeing with the Neptune and Pisces. We're seeing this whole, like Ed Green calls her book, quest for redemption. Who's going to redeem? I mean, we've been watching that unfold. And how are the old structures going to dissolve? Because Saturn and Pisces and Neptune and Pisces coming together, it's definitely like you get this feeling of the way water is very powerful to dissolve existing structures.
Yeah, Sherene, was that your newsletter that I read about kind of how water, erodes mountains? Was that, I think that was if you could talk a little bit about that, but because I think that was a really great, illustration of how Saturn and Neptune are very different energies, but both of them in Pisces have this really powerful energy.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The way I just intuitively feel into this is the idea of the power of Saturn to crystallize things, to bring things into form, and the power of Neptune to imbue things with a certain frequency, a certain divine connection, like a conduit kind of energy on the higher, if we're looking at the higher potential. Or there can be that, yes, that erosion or that dissolution or that disillusionment or that, like I said, like a hysteria or like a mass psychosis or mass addiction. Like we're already seeing the addiction problems. The other thing to mention is, Rahu or North Node, of course, in Vedic astrology is already in Pisces, but it will be going into Pisces and Western as well. So there we have triple Pisces energy. So it's, and in Vedic astrology, Rahu magnifies things. In Western, the North Node, people consider that's eclipse energy, right? So it's going to magnify those energies. I believe we're already in it because, as you know, I do practice Vedic. I believe we're already in a trip. Well, here's the thing. This is where they kind of overlap. So we can talk about Saturn and Pisces in Western. It's not there yet in Vedic, but in both systems, they're about to all be in Pisces. And that's going to be really powerful. We need the soul right now. That beauty is going to heal us. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. We need the sublime right now. So I'm hoping like we can use this energy to rise up, and to create all of us. If we could all come into this space of imagining something so beautiful and sublime, and that as our future instead of this horror and this dread,
Well, I think when you look at Neptune, it really is about envisioning. If we kind of know that we are all connected. So this is the thing that's interesting. You look at all the outer planets and they all have such different roles they play in our lives. And Neptune is definitely the most elusive one. It's the one that's the hardest to really understand. Like Pluto is like death and rebirth and, like really hard things that sort of like, tears at you, but then you can rise up like a phoenix. I'm like very Plutonian in the work I do. And I know you're a Scorpio, so you can relate to that. And Uranus, it's like sudden shocks. And, it's like we can kind of understand this energy. We can understand Saturn. We can understand Jupiter. We can understand the social planets. But Neptune, it's like, what do you tell people?
Yeah.
And I think that's it. It's like, you don't tell them anything other than, Neptune is like the penultimate, like, okay, so now here we are. What do you envision? Because it's all projection. Because I'm you, you're me, we're all connected. And that's a really hard thing to understand, that the person, 500 miles away that has a completely different political ideology or, different value system, we're a projection. They're a projection. We're all a part of one another. Wow, that's really hard to grasp as a human just trying to fill our gas tank and pick our kids up from school. And, so getting into that space requires like a retreat in India or because the bottom line is like when I'm making dinner, when we get off this call, I've got to go make dinner. I got to clean the house. Like, we're so in our daily lives that we forget that this higher consciousness and soulfulness. Like, who are we? We are each other. We're all connected. Everything I do impacts you. Anybody that's watching this is impacted in some way. And so Neptune is asking us to re-envision what we want for the future.
Oh, I think that's our inner work right now, that we have to find a way to bring together and to hold the infinite possibilities, you know, and what might feel like bigger than life and oceanic and like we're drowning or we're overwhelmed or it's all too much, whatever, however that manifests, and then the part that can actually hold it, because Saturn can hold it, you know, we can make something beautiful out of this potential, this infinite potential.
So do you
We have the
think
best art
that Saturn coming in at this time is really the opportunity to solidify and crystallize and hold the Neptune dream?
Yes, I think that could be the higher potential.
You know, and I think a lot of people hold the world on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And all we can control is ourselves. And that means like being kind, being supportive, reaching out to people, being in that high side of Neptune. She's very spiritually loving, and it is kind to animals and the earth. We have to just do our part. And the more of us that do our part, the more likely it is we will avert disaster. Now, we are being bombarded by the media and lots of, you know, with really like scary things, but we don't have to live in the scary. Doesn't mean stick your head in the sand.
Yeah.
It means make a conscious choice to lean into the healing versus, I mean, mental illness in this country is off the charts.
Yes.
And I really believe that's a result of this Neptune in Pisces too, because people are like ready to check out because it's overwhelming.
Yes.
Don't let yourself be overwhelmed. Don't try to control it.
Well, that's the disconnection from soul and everything being overly medicated and our disconnection, you know, the isolation. There's a big loneliness epidemic. And, you know, I just want to say this about the Saturn Neptune confluence before I forget. When I was researching this for my last class, when I was like, what do they have in common? You know, because I always have to find that common ground. They both are teaching us to be okay to be alone and to not search for something outside of ourselves to fill that void, the ultimate abyss that we all have to face, where we come into this world alone and we go out alone. And if we can face it, if we can handle that, we'll stop taking and exploiting and numbing. You know, we will confront ourselves. We will be able to sit, if we can sit with ourselves, with our soul, and have this dialogue, you know, that is where Saturn and Neptune can come together. Because if not, then we get the very negative experience of both of those archetypal potentials. Like when we don't want to deal with our loneliness, Neptune is the addiction part, right? Or the mental illness part, or some kind of escapism or self-sabotage, or potentially institutionalization. Saturn, it becomes like we wall off, we become very cold, we feel very alone or isolated. Both can be a feeling of exile or abandonment wounds. And of course, Neptune will deal with it more through addiction. Saturn can deal with it more through shame or freezing or depression. You know, I think Saturn's a big influence for depression and fear, guilt, and shame. So if they come together, perhaps they can support us to get back in touch with our soul. And if we can, you know, get to that place where aloneness means all one, like what we were talking about, where we can realize we're all interconnected and you're never alone. When you go deep enough, you go past the loneliness and you realize your salvation or your redemption is not in another person. It's not in the next president. It's not in the next drink. It's not in the next Netflix episode, whatever it is. You know, I don't know. Maybe it is next Netflix series, but whatever our projection of what that redemption, that savior, that, that next thing that's going to make it all right, if we can just sit with ourselves in silence and be with nature and come back to our soul. I think if everyone did that, which is, I think, what the pandemic was trying to tell us to start, like, hey, we kind of missed the message. But I think it was like, can you be okay alone, not shopping, not partying, not running around all over, can you just sit with yourself in nature and the quiet? And look how beautiful the nature was, so thriving then.
I think that's really the heart of it. I think what you kind of just laid out is really the heart of what we're being called to do at this time. And I love that. Can you be okay with your aloneness, to then recognize and get past that, to realize you're not alone? Like, that's the real work.
Yes.
That's the real work, is like, you're never alone.
Yeah.
And people don't feel that way. And I get that. I really do. Like I said, Neptune is really hard to wrap your fingers around. It's really hard concept. When you get there, there's freedom though. And that is where meditation comes into play. That is where, however meditation is for you. I mean, if you're like a super Gemini, it's really hard to like sit there quietly and close your eyes and let your mind go blank. But maybe there is an opportunity for like some really powerful music or guided meditation or mind expanding, breath work. So many different ways to get you to that point where you are just kind of outside of your mind. Like, you get outside the mind into the heart.
Yes, where you're dialoguing with your soul. I am a firm believer in journaling, and I think you don't have to be, I think anybody and everyone can journal. And I know people say, oh, but I don't even know how to write in a book anymore. I type. Well, then you can journal on your computer. Before I go to bed now, I journal on my iPad in bed before I go to sleep. It's like, if I don't do that, it actually helps me sleep. Of course, screens are not ideal, but you know what? This is the age we live in. So I fall sleep like a baby after I journal on my iPad. Sometimes I try to I draw in my journal, but I can't even, I don't even know how to write anymore. Like many of us, I can't even make
the lost art of writing.
I can't even make a letter. Yeah, it's just a hopeless attempt to write. But I, obviously as a Jungian analyst, this is something I am a big proponent of. And that's why most of my work is around these 40-day journaling intensives, because they're soul dialogue. And some people, actually many people that take my 40-day journeys, they don't even want to journal. But even without journaling, they're in a dialogue with their soul for 40 days because they're contemplating, they're reflecting. Maybe they're going for walks or they're listening to music, like you said. But there's a theme, and they are every day working on something, and they're doing introspection. That's the key. However you do it, it's maybe a walk in nature. Maybe it's lying on your back in yoga nidra. Maybe it's, running, bicycling, playing tennis, going to a rock concert, whatever, dancing, singing, making love, making art, whatever it is that connects you to your soul, and you do it consciously. Like, you don't do it. That's the key right now, is like how much we can do things with awareness, because Saturn's all about awareness. Neptune's all about dissolving the, kind of like it wants to just merge back to the source. But if we can merge back to the source with awareness, then wow, that is the mystical experience.
And hopefully it has been an enlightening conversation. So I'm going to close with my regular, as always. The universe is conspiring to help you, and there's a reason and a season for it all. So I think the cosmos is here to kind of guide us. That is my reality that I choose to navigate by.
Me
so
too.
Any final words, Sherene?
Yeah, I love what you said. I think it's just surrendering to the divine and understanding that everything is in divine timing, and we just can't see the biggest, fullest picture yet, but to trust that all of this is unfolding for a higher, I 100% know everything's always unfolding for a higher purpose, a higher purpose, and for our highest good. Like, love is the vibration that is the undercurrent always will prevail. I have no doubt about that.
I love it. Well, thank you. Till next time, stargazers, have a good one.